Good morning. So I pray that whatever occurs in this space today enables human beings and elementary beings to collaborate in a better way to heal the earth.
So be it.
Welcome, everyone.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, me too. So to begin with, we're going to do the crucible. In alchemy, a crucible is a vessel that you put things in to torture them. And the torturing that you do is so that they become more pure. And the work in alchemy and the work on the earth is so that our intent in working with the earth becomes more pure, becomes less self-willed and more in line with the evolutionary principles of the earth. So the crucible, to an alchemist, is a place where nature, as a finished product, is subjected to a process of transformation. And in alchemy, that's called the opus contra naturam, the work against nature. And when people first hear that, they say, "Oh, that's weird." But the work against nature, by definition, is the human.
Yes.
And that simply means the human is set to transform the natural world, which is agriculture and architecture and medicine and art. And those transformations require two things: that I take nature apart in the way that I don't violate the parts. And that takes empathy and an imagination that is geared towards understanding how the phenomenon has come into being. Goethe called it becoming. I have to understand what's known sometimes as the line of emergence of a phenomenon and form an inner picture of it so that I can take it apart without violating the wholeness that it is emerging from to become a thing. So that worldview requires that I have science. Without an objective science, I'm just in fantasy. And fantasy is the tool of the alchemist, but has to be tempered with science. Unfortunately, in the tempering, often, the fantasy is tempered to death and becomes abstract reasoning. And in the abstract reasoning, the scientist has lost the theological principle. And if you read the work of the older scientists, the giants, Newton and Da Vinci and Galileo and Copernicus and Kepler, their work was primarily theological. So contemporary science, due to the need for rigor, has lost the connection with the divine. And the alchemical work is to keep the fantasy alive so that it can connect to the divine world and yet be objective. That's the work. So I need to take apart my cherished belief about how things are in order to be a good scientist. But then I have to work inwardly in an imaginative way, objectively, to reconstruct the thing I've taken apart after I have purified the parts. And when I do that, the new substance is opus naturam, contra naturam. It is not natural, it is transcendent, which is the birthright of the human. However, if I do that in an abstract consciousness without an eye towards the divine world or the becoming of the phenomenon, if I simply see that as an abstract set of principles, I lose the critical part of the transformation, which is, in Rudolf Steiner's work, or his words, piety, humility. Piety is the tool, which is why I burn some incense and pray to a higher space before I do anything out in my little funky laboratory, is to say, I realize I'm not working in a void. My work is embedded in a web, a field of consciousness, and is a player in the field of consciousness, but not the chief executive officer who promulgates from on high. That is a result of binary mathematical consciousness, that thinking. And in the ancient world, everything was fractions and geometry. A fraction always references a whole. A geometry always references a 360-degree divinity. So the mathematics of the ancient world allowed a fantasy life in terms of alchemical practice to stay alive because the reasoning was geometrical and fractional. The divine was part of that. And so anything that came from it was embedded already in a field of consciousness of creativity that was transcendent to the human, but needed the human to interact with it in order for a higher level of transformation. You know, I want to make a pyramid. I want to make a cathedral. I want to make a musical instrument. I want to make a surgical apparatus. which requires that I understand the original intent and then purify that into another form. So the basis of the alchemical worldview hinges on the crucible. The crucible is the place where you put something that's already a fixed something, and you heat it up in order to separate it out, to purify it. So you have been asked to research a conundrum. And in your research, being a human, you form a fixed idea about what you think you understand about that conundrum.
Yeah.
That is your raw material that you will place in the crucible. And the crucible is a place where there is a heat that is applied in order to take apart the fixed nature, the earth nature. You have to apply heat in order to begin to soften, and it's a process called loosening. The heat is your embarrassment of what you don't understand about what you think you understand about the conundrum. And that heat is supplied by the person sitting next to you. So when we come in the mornings, the first portion will be to share a 5-minute, each person gets 5 minutes, to explain to the other person what they think the conundrum was about, or what they think the search term was. So your learning creates in you a residue of the creative energy that it took to learn it. It takes will to learn it, and the will dies once you think you know it. That will needs to be resurrected in a crucible, and the crucible is provided for you by someone else who is listening to you explain something that you think you already know. The difference between the explanations is the new. It's the new place. It's the new bud going into popcorn and about to explode. So when you share with your partner, you're sharing your fixed idea, but they are receiving your fixed idea in the context of their fixed idea, and there is something going on in them. And then you'll switch after 5 minutes. And after 5 minutes, as you switch, the tables will be turned. You'll hear their fixed idea, and you'll be evaluating in the context of what you thought your fixed idea was when you gave it to them a couple minutes ago. And in the space between, there's a warmth that grows that we call community. A learning community. And the agent, the most powerful agent in that learning community, is that you both are sharing something that you knew nothing about a while ago, and now you have made a will effort to learn something about it, and now that is taken to another level by presenting it to another human. This is very, very high alchemy. Very high alchemical transformation, and we're going to do it every month when we come back in order to create a learning community. A learning community is when you hear something from your partner about the subject that you have in common as a task, and that creates in you another insight. That's the purpose of the crucible, because your fixed belief has just been purified. It's been lifted homeopathically to a higher level. Once that happens in you, we'll have a little time to share any insight that you got from your partner. We'll do a popcorn for the whole group. My partner said this, and suddenly I saw that. And that'll be our crucible. My hope is that it provides a kind of social yeast for you to meet people and to become excited about other people's work and insight. Okay, any questions about the process? Okay, find a partner, 5 minutes you share, hit the gong, and then 5 minutes somebody else.
I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna find some. Maybe 2 minutes.
Okay.
We'll do that. Yeah.